Well, good morning, everyone. And I like hearing the dog. I get a little applause from the dog. That's pretty good. That's really good. So now you're going to have to bear with me. We're talking about font, and I didn't increase the font on my piece here, and I'm wearing progressive lens, so it is a challenge. I have never gotten used to them, so if you see me take my glasses off and put them back on, you're going to be blurry, and this is going to look good. Fair enough? Before I start, I really want to thank Beth. Let's start with Beth, because I get this call from this dynamic person who says, I want you in a room and I want you to fly to Minnesota. I'm like, Minnesota, it's cold. I hate the cold. I was in Madison, Wisconsin a couple of weeks ago. I hate the cold when I'm in the cold. And when I left Philadelphia, it was like 45 degrees, so I really hate the cold. But she has been phenomenal. I come from policing, and I had a strong team around me, and I know what makes things go. And so I want to give acknowledgement to Beth and her entire team, all of the folks from the Human Rights Department, to put these conferences together. This is not easy to do. Many of you know that. It is a lot of work. So Beth, she's taking care of me. I'm like, listen, my wife like, who's this Beth? He's doing all this work with you. I'm like, it's fine. So thank you, Beth. Thank you. When you're traveling, you got to be careful, right? I didn't want to thank the commissioner and the deputy commissioner from the Human Rights Department. I told Ship Chandler, did I do it right? I told her I was going to butcher it, and Kevin for letting me to come into this space. It's odd. Probably you all looking and say, what is a cop doing in a human rights presentation? And I often ask, and my wife asked me that, what are you doing in human rights? But I guess the reality is this is about human rights. And at the end of the day, when I looked down, and I said, well, this didn't say human relations, it said human rights. And I went on the website and started all the work that the Human Rights Division is doing to change the lives of everyone across Minnesota, and all the actions that have been taken. I was very proud to lend my voice to that effort. Now, I talked to the translator earlier, and my folks over here, I talk fast. They told me to slow down like Kevin talks. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do that. I am going to try. So if you wave over here and say, Kevin, slow it down, I do have a tendency to talk very fast and do that. I do have some notes here. I don't normally talk from notes, but I oftentimes walk away from my conversations with folks a little frustrated because I miss things. Yesterday I spoke for 2 hours. I met some phenomenal people. I had lunch with Mr. Chandler. Is it Chandler? Did I do it right? Crawford. And very welcoming and brought me into this space. And so I do want to acknowledge that. So I'm going to start out. Yesterday I spoke for 2 hours. I really did a deep dive into our program and really talked about the nitty gritty of my program, but I got my orders from Beth to do a little bit of both of it. And so I'll talk a little bit more globally as I see things. And then I'll drill down a little bit into our program, not as to the nitty gritty that I did yesterday, but then I'll share a video with you. PBS did a video of our program. And I wasn't going to assert it, but yesterday when I was thinking, I said, how could I get you to see, not my big head talking at the beginning of it, but more importantly, what happens and what's working with the youth. And for those who work in service and work with young people, your opportunity to see kids really changing their lives, let you see what that looks like. I know you got an award. I came in the other day and you got this Emmy for a video you showed yesterday, was it? So I said, I'm going to bring my video out. You know what I mean? And no, I don't have an Emmy for it. I'm going to bring my video out and share my video now. But again, it's just a way to encapsulate that process. So, one of the things, just an overview of my conversation today is, one of the questions, what if instead of criminalizing normal adolescent behavior in schools, police are trained to identify and respond to the root causes of those behaviors? What do you think about that? Think that's a good idea? You think it's a good idea not to send my cops into a room untrained and then expect a different result when I toss them in a chair or grab them out of the chair and pull them out of the classroom? I would think that, right? To dismantle the school, the prison pipeline, a disturbing national trend. And as I moved into this space, where the large percentage, the disproportionate number of the kids of color are being taken and funneled into the school, the prison pipeline. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. I won't get into the other areas, but we know there's just not the school and just not police funneling these kids into the system. It's not just about the school doing that. Police departments can learn how to help keep youth safe. That's an oddity, right? And the Philadelphia Police School Diversion Program, which I will talk about today, is a community-based rooted in intervention, trauma services. Wait a minute. I'm a cop, right? I'm already out of my lane, right? Rooted in interventions and trauma from a police officer, and be a leading example for second chances, and not an arrest. And that's what I'm in this space in my life, and moving my life into a life of service now, and moving from a law enforcement and walking away and into this place is about giving kids second chances. And I think all too often, and I was talking to Commissioner Lindsay earlier, with this process of zero tolerance, and it has to be this way, and it's got to be this way, and we got to lock up. No, we don't. I tell my law enforcement colleagues across the nation, how important it is. If we don't change, this process will not change. And why are people angry at me? As I pull back the layers, and so let me back up a minute. I was a cop, and I said this yesterday. I'm a cop for 29 years. I'm not an expert in juvenile justice. I've been in the last 3 years and 4 years, I've immersed myself in this space. And I sit there and I say to myself, oh my God. Every day I think about where I'm sending young people into. And had I known, ladies and gentlemen, oh man, I wish I could turn back my clock to all those days when I brought a child into the criminal justice system, had I known that I would lead them down this path that they may never get out. It's shocking for me to know that, and know the space that I've been in, contributed to that, and my position contributed to that. And so I'm going to ask you a question as I start out. When you were younger, how many of you ever walked into school and talked back to your teacher? The first hand went up was Beth. I'm just letting y'all know that in the background. How many of you ever walked in and brought a pair of scissors into your classroom? And I showed a video yesterday, I won't show it today, of a young child getting arrested for coming in our school for scissors. In my school district, kids come through metal detector, walk through a metal detector, and the metal detector goes off, and that would result in arrest. That was my system. How many of you have gotten into a small scuffle or a small fight in school? And so the reality is, if you were born before before 1990, early late 80s, was any of that arrest? Before the Safe School Act in 1994, and before we put a lot of police officers into this space, before we started to criminalize a lot of this behavior, that was not. I did an exercise yesterday. I'm going to do it with you right now. I'm not going to ask you to pass it in, but some of the folks that were in the room. Who was in the room with me yesterday? So a handful of people in the room. So this is all new to you. So here's what I want you to do. But I'm not going to collect it, but I just wanted to start the mind and thinking in the direction that I'm going. You got a piece of paper in front of you. All right? On that piece of paper, I want you to do this. I still got yours, Carl. I got it up here, man. I'm taking it back with me. Knowing what you know now, knowing all the things and all your experiences now, what you could have got locked up for as a juvenile. So you're all done some crazy things in your adolescence. You probably got into some fights. You may have walked in school with a weapon in a pair of scissors in your bag. You may have walked in with a knife in your bag. You may have drank before you were 21. Write down on a piece of paper a few things. Now, if you need an extra sheet of paper, we start seeing you flipping pages. We know we got a problem. And as I told the group yesterday, the statute of limitations, there's no statutory limitation on murder, so we won't be taking any of those. But just take a moment to get your mind framed around some of the things you have done in your careers as juveniles and could have gotten arrested for it. Now, I know attorneys in the room and any judges in the room, usually the ethics issue, I ain't writing that down. But just take a couple minutes. Oh, look at this. Ain't an open book test now. Come on. All right. Everybody's good? You got it there? I won't collect it. Yesterday I collected them. I ripped them up. I made sure everybody I ripped them up. I did a presentation with cops. And I did this program with the police officers. And I bring commanders across the nation, and we come together for the International Association of Chiefs of Police, and I have them write that card. Nobody will write on the card. Nobody would put anything down in the car. You know why? In the room, there was cameras all over the room. And their biggest fear is that we were videotaping them write these things down. So I literally had to spend 5 minutes convincing them that this is going to be okay, that it's all going to be okay. We just wanted to start that exercise. And if I told you what those chiefs wrote on the card, what would you think that would be? Yeah, what do you think they wrote on the cards? What do you think in this room is on those cards? I think Beth referenced a professor now, or a book that's been written around. What's the name of the book you said, Beth?
We Are All Criminals, Emily Baxter's book.
Yeah, and so I'm interested in reading about that. But this exercise kind of falls in that same line. All of you probably wrote something on that piece of paper. I'm sure all of you have written something on that piece of paper. And if I took out my card, it would say all the things that I did. I fought in school. I carried a knife to school. I did some things that I'm not proud of, but what happened? I didn't get caught. Look at all of these folks in the room. I often challenge the folks when I talk to them, look at all of these people in the room and look where you are now. And so when we make decisions about other people's kids, those are not my kids, they're somebody else's kids. The challenge they will face. I showed a video yesterday. I won't show it today because I keep it close to the vest, but it's a video of a young girl getting arrested for coming to school with a pair of scissors, and it walks her through that process. The video watches her as she walks from school, and she's taken into school, and she's put into handcuffs, and she's transported to our headquarters. And what I talked about yesterday, folks look on this thing and they said, well, there's no sofa here, right? There's no TV with MTV, and they're not cookies, and they walk into the solitary room where they sit in there where it smells like urine, and it will stay like that forever because the stench is just so embedded in cement. That the courts only allowed me to say all I only have to do is keep that child's sight and sound away from an adult. And so when we made that decision, sight and sound from the adult, we just put them in a closet that we converted for a youth to stay in. And he watches that youth will go into the back, and she'll be fingerprinted, and she'll be photographed, and she'll be held in that cell block, and she'll come back to the cell block. We didn't ask any questions about that. Right? And so one of the things we would do is take her back in the cell block, call her parents. And I presented that video to the group and then talked about what does that mean? What is the trauma that I inflict on a child when I do that? I travel across this nation and I'm shocked to hear that a 7-year-old child would be arrested, where there's no state minimum age for a child being arrested. Are you kidding me? In the state of Pennsylvania, our minimum age is 10 years of age. You close your eyes, you think about yourself with 10-year-olds. You close your eyes, you think about the 10-year-old that you know. And imagine that child being arrested. See, the part of the challenge is just connecting. And as they know, at the end of the video, when we talk about the video, when I disclose it, that video is my daughter. And people look at me like, your daughter. And I talk about the fact that I was so frustrated traveling around in this space and trying to tell, and most of my audience is audience of folks who have been in this space for a long time, and said, do you know what it's like when you send them to me? And many of them are folks who are making decisions about young people who don't have any clue where they're sending them to. And so I sat there that day and I talked to my daughter, and I had my daughter, and I said, I got to show this video. I got to show people what it's like to come into custody, what it's like for them to give them to me, what it's like for them to walk through this process, what is it like for us to treat this child in such an inhumane way. And my daughter was not really arrested. We went out on a Saturday morning. I took my video crew and we went out and we did this filming. But I talked to the group yesterday about how I struggle with that. How the fact that just me sitting over in the corner and watching her go through that process, ladies and gentlemen, was a struggle for me. I could not believe my beautiful 11-year-old daughter would be a call, and somebody would call me and arrest her because she came to school with a pair of scissors. And I told you that was a reinforcing moment for me to recognize that I had to do something different. That I could not stand by anymore and allow children in the city of Philadelphia and as I travel around the nation trying to convince my colleagues that it's wrong what we're doing. That we have to change the system, that we can't continue to be in this space. And so when we talk about this process, we do call it the school to prison pipeline, which is a tough process on crime and a disturbing trend where I talked about where boys and girls, and particularly boys of color in the city of Philadelphia, a majority of my kids are boys of color, are being arrested. thousands and thousands of children being put through this harsh process, which affects their graduating rates and getting into college and securing good paying jobs. Because we don't talk oftentimes about the collateral consequences. So we can talk about school diversion, I can talk about the law enforcement, but we can also talk about foster care to prison pipeline, where I have so many of my young kids who are in foster care who come into our school setting, who've been to multiple homes, who walk into that setting and no one giving them any guidance, and then they get in trouble, and guess what? I get called to lock them up. Really? You know what it's like? It was a commander in the room yesterday, and I sit there and I leaned to him. I said, listen, let me ask you, Commander, if you knew the kid you were getting ready to lock up for a low-level offense or an offense overall had been in 4 foster care units, has spent 2 months in a mental health institution, has no contact with any of his parents, has 3 siblings that he hadn't seen in months. He's 10 years old, and now he's coming to school, and he's gotten into a fight, and you're called to lock him up. Would you make a different decision? And if the member in the room called, he immediately say, absolutely. And so my frustration is not knowing that, right? I can't tell you how frustrated it is as a deputy commissioner to get that call, because what I described to you is a true incident. That you really called, I locked up that child? You let me lock this child up? With all the trauma that's been inflicted on him, I called to lock him up? You know how frustrating that is for me as someone who's in this space and my police officers, and so we share that frustration. And so we look at the pipeline, we could talk about the suspensions, and we won't talk about that, but I applaud the work that the Human Rights is doing in that space around suspensions. Because listen, ladies and gentlemen, I'll tell you what, the suspensions were worse than my arrest. You send my child home for 5 days, what do you think I get on the street as a law enforcement officer? We wonder why our kids go into the sex trade and drug trade, and human trafficking. You have a child who's been sexually abused, and you send her home for 2 weeks. You have my child who's being beat, and we send him home. I tell you what, I'll keep it simple for you. We have that child who, when he eats, the only time he eats is when he comes to our school setting, and we send him or her home. There's so many pipelines in this process. So I'm not here to dig deep into that, but I do recognize the importance of how that plays out in this process. So I'm trying to do my part. The challenge for many of the parts of this system to do their part. I always have this slide, and I put it up because it just reminds me I didn't come to cop to lock up children. And I let that sit for a minute because that's just my reality. I didn't come in this space, and I never thought, I was telling them the other day, I said, listen, I come from a very violent city in Philadelphia. Very violent. One of the poorest cities in the nation. On average, we'll do 300 homicides a year for murders in the city of Philadelphia, and around 1,300 or 1,400 shootings. And I don't say that with pride, but it also makes you set the framework for where my kids come from. And I was talking, I said, you know what my clearance rate for shootings, 1,200, 1,300 shootings, about 20%. My clearance rate for murders, if you murder somebody in the city of Philadelphia, around 45%. My clearance rate for locking up kids in school was? 100%. We got that right all day long. We had absolutely no problem locking up kids. Kid come in, kid do offense, kid get locked up. Kid come in, kid do offense, get kid locked up. 100% clearance rate. And so I make this argument, and I make it as part of my passion now, is I believe when addressing normal adolescent behavior, a second chance and a not arrest is the best option to improve their social and well-being of young people across the country. But it is a multi-pronged approach. Now I'll talk about, I took the lead as a law enforcement. I was blessed, ladies and gentlemen, in this room. I was blessed because I'm the deputy commissioner, and I answer to 2 people. And so as a result of moving forward with that process, I also make policy and I can implement policy. And that's not a bad combination. For those who work in this stakeholder spot, to be at the top of the heap and be able to say, you know what, I want to do this, I write it, and then I execute it. That was the beauty of the work I was able to do, but I also recognize that I need help. that this process doesn't come to fruition. And when you see in the video, you'll see how when really things really come together, how you can have the impact on a child's life. And so part of that process is Philadelphia Police Diversion Program, which I'll talk about soon, is really identifying the root causes, as I said in my opening, but also understanding the adolescent behavior. And instead of criminalizing that adolescent behavior, we work to address that behavior. And so when we think about all of this stuff, and I'll talk about that, the key part of this is really around training my men and women of how to deal with young people in this space. Oftentimes a complaint, and you hear me reemphasize that as I'm talking to you, 30 years ago when I came out the academy, and I was given, as I talked about yesterday, a pair of handcuffs, a baton, a stick, I had a mace, and a gun. Are you waiting for the other stuff? It didn't come. I didn't get training around de-escalation. You know what I was told, ladies and gentlemen? You're in the biggest gang in the city of Philadelphia, 8,000 men and women. If you get 8,001 is when you should start getting nervous. Other than that, you don't stand down from nothing. You fight, you're the aggressor, you take it to that individual, you lock people up, and you know what you do with the rest? You let all those other people deal with that. No one talked to me about consequences. No one talked to me about any of those issues. My job was to lock people up, and they drilled that in me for 9 months. You will lock people up. Do we get a different result from that? What happens when I train men and women around adolescent development? Policing is about pulling up on your bootstraps. I'm born, and when I came up, you pull up as a cop, you pull up I came from the neighborhood, man, you should be able to make it too. It wasn't any of those things layered in around adolescent development, about mental health and about collateral consequences, about de-escalation, all those tools that we work to give our men and women now. So when they walk into that setting and they engage a child, hey, guess what? It might be nice to know that there's trauma triggers on a young lady, and that when you touch her on the back and put your arm around her, you may launch her into some space that she's never been before, and then you're trying to figure out what happened there. Maybe if I told you don't put your hands on, you may not hit her triggers. Maybe if I teach you to slow it down, maybe you won't escalate the situation. And maybe force is not the way to get yourself out of that situation. Part of what I do, and it's funny, people laugh when I put this dot on the screen. You're not laughing because it's not funny, but but when I was doing my I did a presentation and I was talking, and they said, well, listen, I'm a visual person. I need visual things to kind of wrap my head around it. And I said, well, let me play with something around this myth around young people. If you read the media, if you read the news, what leads on your news in Minnesota is probably what leads in Philadelphia and St. Paul and all across the nation. What leads? Weather, murders, violence, all that, right? I mean, that's in my city, that's the first 5 minutes is who was killed. If they couldn't find anything in Philly, then they go around, they'll hit the counties, which is a very rarity, but they'll find something because it's got to be this space. If we listen to the media, we would have you believe that are we still waiting on the super predator? We're still waiting on that. Are we, Commissioner? The super predator is supposed to be coming, right? This world, they're going to grow up, and we're all supposed to fear this young kid because he's going to get us. Oh, man, that was about 25 years ago, right? I think he's an adult now. I think he may have aged out, only to turn around and find those people who put us in this space of looking at our kids from a criminal's perspective now write articles about how they were wrong, right? Yeah, no kidding. No kidding. Yeah, you were wrong. So I often put this up on the screen because you know what that dot represent? And that ocean of sea of black, and then no reference to the colors, have no reference to race. What does that represent? You're never going to get it. But if you'd be an amazing person. I put that dot up because that represents the kids who are violent, right? That 5% of those kids who do that violence, maybe heinous, egregious stuff. You say, yeah, I need to have that kid for a moment. I need to take that kid into custody. I need to find out. That rest of that space is all that 95% of our kids that just do stupid, nonviolent, adolescent behavior. What are we doing? That C over there represents a large group of our kids. I sat in the center not too long ago. I did a program where they're bringing folks in across and to talk to young people in our center, in our youth center. And I'm sitting at a desk of young kids, Latino kids, African American kids, predominantly in the system. And I'm sitting across 10 kids. And guess what, ladies and gentlemen? What are they there for? New offenses? No. 9 out of 10 of the kids were sitting there for violations of their probation. The judge told them to go to school. Hey, they weren't going to school before they got locked up. You put no services in there to get them to go to school, and then you lock them up when they didn't go to school. You locked them up because they showed up late, because they didn't have their ankle brace and they came in late, so we're going to bring them back into custody again. You know, I sat there and watched kids trembling and scared to death because they brought in the system for these. That is the space that I spend my part of my life in now. And yes, I like to take it all. I don't have the expertise to deal with that 5%. But maybe if we took the time and got rid of the 95%, we could spend the time on that 5% who really, really need the guidance we have for them. You know, the most important part of this process is, I'll skip around and I'll come back to the other one, is really understanding, you know, what is this space? You know, as I talked about, you know, if we do a deeper dive into the symptoms of why we're in this space, and we look at the kids that I encounter now who have learning disabilities, who are in poverty, who are in trauma, who have unstable family lives, who are street violence and hungry. You know, I put this slide up there because it represents all the kids that I see now. See, I always looked at data from a crime fighting perspective. How many offenses out there? Put the cops on the dot. If I have arrests, that tells me that I'm doing a good job. I never looked at the outcome data of who I was arresting and who they are. When I take those same questions of who, what, when, where, and why and apply them to the back end is when I really start to get to the true root issues here. You know, then when we walk into our systems and we see, you know, kids who are coming from parents and separate, hey, guess what? 70% of my kids are being diverted in our diverger program come from single parent households. Does that have an impact on them moving forward? Yeah. Particularly if they don't have, you know, if mom is struggling and working to do that. You know, I talked about the violence that I have in the city, and that was just a small snapshot of the 65,000 issues of violence and violence we have across the city. And my kids who walk through that toxic stress every day. You think that has an impact on the kids that comes into the system, and particularly as I talk about the school to pipeline? You know, chaos and dysfunction in their homes. Clearly, we see that. You know, the emotional abuse and neglect. You know, clearly, we see that in our program as we address these kids, and we see this every day. You know, bullying. You know, I tell folks, you know, and if I miss it out and repeat myself is, you know, we're locking up kids for coming to school with a weapon. As I told the group yesterday, what happens when I start to find and slow it down and realize that many of the kids we were locking up for a weapon were being bullied the weeks and days before. And they've grabbed something to put in their bag to work as they're being bullied, or sometimes they're being bullied on their way home. So they decide they're going to grab themselves a little weapon, and they grab that BB gun from the store at the corner who sells a $3 BB gun that makes it look real for them. And then what happens when I turn that around and go back to the store owner and say, why are you selling BB guns to my children? Maybe you should take those out of the store. And so these things around trauma are very at the forefront of where I'm at in this space as well. You know, we have to get to know these children. You know, I was mentioned earlier, I have a daughter with sickle cell disease. You know, and she's going through school and she gets sick in school and she doesn't want, she has a lot of pride, so she's in college now, first year of college. And so, you know, she has a 504 plan that I could do to let everyone know that she has an illness. So if something happens to her, the teachers would know that they should probably do something different with my daughter. My daughter doesn't want to do that. I want the teachers to see me the same. Okay. And so she goes through and she's doing very well until she gets, and most times my daughter would get sick for, I don't know why, the weekends were where she would have her sicknesses, but very rarely did she miss school during the week, but then she gets sick during the week. My daughter's out of school for a week, and she's in a very special school, and she walks back in that Monday, and her head is spinning. And I walk in the room, and she's crying, and I'm like, what's wrong with you? She's crying, I I can't keep up. I said, well, why didn't, and so I finally convinced her that she has to do a 504 plan. So guess what? Folks will know. And what happens when you walk back to her teachers and they say, looking at me like, I wish I knew your daughter was inflicted with this disease. I would have done something differently. And so I take that story just to encapsulate the reality that we have to do things differently. We have to see these kids in a different way. And so I'll back up a minute because I want to show you, hey, this is me. Now my afro is cut off at the top, so it's kind of funny. I do have I went for the afro, the shag. So those in the room, it's an Afro-American, it's a black thing, but I got the cornrows, you know what I mean? And I went to the bush, and then I had the shag that just hanging off the back. You know what I'm talking about, Carl? You know what I mean? You with me? You know what I mean? And so I had those things, and I'm saying, you know what? But the reason I show it because, you know, I sit here as a guy who stands before you whose mother was raised 4 boys by herself. You know, my father left a 4-year-old, a 7-year-old, a 10-year-old, an 11-year-old for my mother to raise. You know, I came out of a community that was tough and stayed the course. I remember, I have no pictures of me as a child. I was a big athlete. I have no pictures of me as a child. I have none of my trophies. I have none of those trinkets that you carry through your life. Especially because we would get addicted multiple times as my mom moved around. Now listen, I don't set this up to make anybody feel sorry for me because I thought I was poor until I became a cop and I walked into some of these doors and I realized, yeah, but I had a house over my head over my house. I had a roof over my head. I had those things and I thought I was poor until I walked into some of these homes. You know, and I did those knucklehead things. You know what I mean? I did all of that knucklehead stuff that we talked about. But I had a community, right? I had my mother, who was a very strong and proud woman. And God, she's looking down at me now, and I hope she's proud of me. You know, and I had those folks in my space to help me. And so I showed a picture of school because I tell people when I'm doing my presentation, I loved school, ladies and gentlemen. See, when I didn't have any gas, electric, food, and all those things, school. I never missed a day of school. I was a prom king, ladies and gentlemen. I loved school. It is where I had fellowship. It is where my friends were. It is where I ate when I was hungry. You know, listen, it was where I played sports. I played sports because, listen, it kept me in school. So I played sports, and you know, I ran track in the indoor. I couldn't run, but I ran track. I did football. I played baseball. But the coaches, I think about those teachers, you know, who grabbed me and would give me their advice all the time. I think about all those administrators in the school who, when I walk by, say, Kev, how you doing today? I can't tell you how great that felt. And I tell you what, guess what? In my yearbook, I opened it up today and I read it. I'm like, how did they know that about me? Kevin, you're going to be somebody someday. Kevin, you have a lot of potential. I read this report and I said, well, how did they know all this stuff about me, Commissioner? How did they know that? How did they see all those things that I see? I didn't see at the time. And so I show that picture because I have so much great pride. I tell people, why do you lock up my kid who travels an hour across the city to get to your school, and we lock him up? I said, why would I remember talking to teachers and saying, the child, you know, I took him, he traveled all the way across the city to get to your school. Do you think he came there to be arrested? And here's the kicker. He gets suspended, and he comes back to school the next day, and guess what we would do? We lock him up for trespassing. Really? You know, the important role that schools played in my life, I try to convince those in that space, in that teaching space, in that administrative space, that the school is the most critical role. Where they will spend the most time. And if it's done right, if it's done appropriately, we can. I went to John Bartram High School, one of the worst schools in the city of Philadelphia right now. I did okay though. You know, because they got me through and they understand that we could do things better. You know, I would move on to become a deputy commissioner and as you heard, and served 29 years and did the 8 years, but I also recognize that policing has its flaws. I don't stand up here because I did this conversation in uniform, so I don't sit here because, oh, I'm not a cop anymore, I'm retired. You know, I was doing the DMC work and racial ethnic disparities work and the work that I'm in this space now and implicit bias space and all that because I recognize the flaws in policing as well. For a long time, we walked in the silos and believed that we don't have to listen to those around us and we can do this all by ourselves and we don't, God forbid I would sit down with the human rights. You know what it's like to be a cop in this room right now? We would have never, even in a retired space, been in this space. The fact that when I saw police officers in the meeting, in the room yesterday, and commander in the room, and folks are invited in the room, we didn't do that. You stay over there, I stay over here, he sues me, I get pissed off, and we go back and forth. That's how we operate, and I know those in that space can tell you, the way you got response from policing was just sue us. The way we brought about change was being sued, consent decrees, and all that other space. But for those police and all police departments that want to be progressive, have to do that. And so as I talked through that process, I really became to understand that I needed, that we have our flaws, and that we have to work to address those flaws. And so let me transition into, what really brought me into this space. And there's a video I'll show you in a minute, but to set it up, as I talked about yesterday, I walk into, I'm in the Philadelphia Police Department, I'm a deputy commissioner, and I've been to all this training, I'm all trained up now, and ladies and gentlemen, my light bulb is on. I am in a different space now, and I think I understand that I have a different role, I have to do different things, and I have this program, and I'm working with folks, and I come back to Philadelphia, and I decide that I'm going to focus in the school-to-prison pipeline. And because that was one of the most egregious areas of kids coming into the system for us. And through the data, I looked down on the sheet and I realized 1,600 kids in the city of Philadelphia are being arrested for coming in school, in the schools of the city of Philadelphia. That unfortunately, our school district was our #1 complaining for arresting juveniles in the criminal justice system and bringing them into the system. And as I more understood the collateral consequences that were happening to those kids, the fines and fees that they were not paying, and their inability to get out that system really magnified. I remember the day, I know I'm talking fast, so let me slow down. I remember the day, I can feel myself talking fast. My wife's used to like, I remember the day, when I walked into Commissioner Ramsey's office, and he was a commissioner at the time, and Commissioner Ross, who's the commissioner today, and said I couldn't do it anymore. I'm an African-American male growing up in the city, and I spoke yesterday, I said, we talk about the issue of who's in leadership. The mayor's African-American, the DA's African-American, the Defender Association is African-American, the president of the city council is African-American, the majority of the city council is African-American, the superintendent is African-American, the police chief is American-American, his 2 right-hand people are African-American. I'm still locking up 1,600 kids, the majority of them African-American Latino. So the part of that process is being ignorant to the information and not really understanding our role and responsibility. I didn't understand this space. I said that earlier. I did not know this space. But when data jumps off the page so glaringly and you're saying, I lock up children for that? Really? For that? It became my life's mission to say, you know what? I'm not going to do that in Philadelphia anymore. And so we decided in lieu of arresting a child, we would create a pre-arrest diversion program. Hey, guess what? I'm not going to lock up. You don't want 85% of the kids we were locking up were being diverted the next day. What do you think about that? My frustration is I should have known, but somebody should have told me. I should have known. If I was doing a better job, if I was a better leader, if I was really looking at the data in the right way, I should have known. But the reality, I didn't. But I also said somebody should have told me. Why didn't you tell me that the kids I was locking up, a 10-year-old child, the next day you were sending them out to the youth aid panel and you didn't want them to go before the judge? And so part of my process would be I want to change the system and I'm going to do a pre-arrest diversion program. I want to say, hey, guess what? When I come to school, I'm not going to lock up those kids for these certain offenses. Marijuana, fighting, coming to school with a weapon, not a gun. I locked up kids who come to school with mace. I explained yesterday, 60 African-American females got locked up over the last 2 years for mace before we started our program. Think we had a deployment of mace in the school? No. You think if we took time to ask those African-American females why they were carrying mace and they told you what, ladies and gentlemen in the room? Protection. What is it like when you hear a young girl talk about how, in the video, you'll see why she was carrying her weapon. And so we didn't ask those questions. And so we would do a pre-arrest diversion where we would come to the school and the officer would make the diversion process at the point of contact at the school. We would make the decision that we would no longer bring those kids into the system for these offenses, and we knew we were going to reduce those numbers by diverting them into a program at the point of contact with no collateral consequences, no arrest paperwork, no fines, no fees, services. And that would be our goal, to change the system of what we had allowed for decades. I look back to the data. When I look down at the sheet, ladies and gentlemen, I can't tell you how angry I was at myself. When I sat there and looked before we started our program with thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of kids who had been arrested prior. And prior to 3 years ago, they couldn't get their record expunged because many of them were locked up for summary offenses, so they weren't adjudicated delinquent, so they weren't eligible to get their expungement after 5 years, so they just carried it into adulthood. And I think about how angry those thousands of kids are at my cops and my law enforcement officers. Part of this process was changing the minds of my men and women in the field. And I go back to, I said 30 years ago, I gave them I came out of the law enforcement with no tools. What happened when I gave the law enforcement men and women a new tool? A tool that said that they can make a different choice. You think they took it? Absolutely. I stand here before you because the 84 men and women are the ambassadors of the program. They embraced it. You know, I started a program. I brought a group of 84 men and women into the room and said, I want to do something different. I'm going to give you a new tool, and I want you to work with me. I walked out that room and I gave him my phone number, and within the next 2 days, my phone rang excessively about, hey, boss, I got this kid. You said you're going to do this diversion program. I don't want to lock him up. And it was through their push that we started in June of 2014 with a notepad, a cell phone for my IT unit, and a chair. And we said every child in the city of Philadelphia, I don't care if you went to public, parochial, Catholic school, charter school, will be eligible to be diverted pre-arrest if you met the criteria. 1, never been arrested before. My data already said 99% of my kids had not. 2, these are the offenses, and majority of my data said that almost 80% of the 70% of the offenses would be in that space. And finally, just those 2 criteria were going to be able, and it had no serious priors. Most of my kids fit the criteria. And that would be, but I also would establish would there be no bias in the system either. So I don't care if he was not a B student. I didn't care if he didn't speak to you in the morning. I didn't care if the principal didn't like him. I didn't care if a teacher didn't think he walked the halls and drove him crazy. So this is the time I'm going to get him. Those 2 core criteria made every child eligible and would have a significant impact on the system. And so what I want to do is and give you show you a 10-minute video. So listen, I don't say this video to promote me because my head looks extremely big on this video. I'm just letting you know. But more importantly, what I want you to emphasize, and the reason I show this video is I often show this for the folks who do work of service. You know, disregard my comments up front, but more importantly, focus on what happens to the young person when they come into our system, and what happens when a system like ours, law enforcement, makes a different decision. How 2 representatives, there's 2 kids in the video, where you see their outcomes are going in a totally different track than where they were started. And then we'll come back and we'll wrap up. I can't, because you have the screen at the bottom, I can't get to the bottom, I can't see it. Is it? Okay, okay, thank you. That's pretty good over there.
Across the nation, leaders in both education and law enforcement are rethinking school discipline. The harsh rules that result in kids being put into the criminal justice system at a very early age are giving way to something new. NewsHour Weekend's Megan Thompson reports from Philadelphia.
West Philadelphia High School Principal Mary Dean hoped this would be a quiet Friday morning.
I expected more from you.
But school security just found 2 students with several vials of marijuana. They've detained them in handcuffs until Philadelphia police officers arrive. It's a common scene in a neighborhood with high rates of poverty and crime. And just a few years ago, under the school district's zero tolerance policy, both students would have been arrested, no questions asked. Today, it's likely only 1 student will be arrested because he's already on probation wearing an ankle bracelet.
You done already messed your chances up. This is what I mean by you doing dumb stuff out there. Or in here.
But for the other student who has no record, there's another option.
You do what you're supposed to do, it'll all go away. You don't have to worry about these charges or nothing. If you don't, then of course all the marijuana charges will be brought against you.
Rather than being arrested, the student is put in the Philadelphia Police School Diversion Program, a citywide initiative that aims to keep kids out of the criminal justice system for misdemeanors. Things like having drugs in school or bringing items that are banned, like pocket knives and BB guns, even hair combs and scissors, which could be dangerous.
We have a bottle opener, which can still be used as a weapon, as a point.
Philadelphia police officer Tamisha Golfin says sometimes kids have a reasonable explanation.
I totally forgot the knife that was in the book bag. I really forgot.
In March, 10th grader Sanaj Jackson set off a metal detector when, he says, he accidentally brought a kitchen knife to school. He'd been locked out of his house the night before and borrowed the knife from his grandmother to pick the lock.
And I got in and I put the knife in my book bag, and then I forgot to take it out. Then the next morning I went to school, and then when I put my book bag through the monitor, he said, "We have a problem."
Sanaj says getting arrested would have affected the entire family. His mom works full-time, so he helps take care of his 5 brothers and sisters.
The first thing I thought about was my mom. I don't want to go to jail. I got 20 brothers and sisters. I gotta be here for them. Then I got scared, my heart dropped, my stomach bubbling up. So I'm like, I might be going away.
But Sanaj didn't go away. He qualified for the new diversion program because 1, it was his first offense, and 2, it was a low-level offense that didn't involve a victim. So now Sanaj goes to a 90-day after-school program that provides mentoring and support. It includes group sessions where they discuss drugs and alcohol.
The reason why a lot of people do different types of drugs is because you have some kind of problem, like he said, stress.
And they talk about anger management and conflict resolution.
You guys are young. You guys are going to have interactions with the police in your life at some point.
And the people that work there, they very respectful. They don't talk to you in a disrespectful way. Even if you disrespect them, they still talk to you respectfully. And that's one thing I like about them.
Sometimes it's difficult for just the parents in the school, but now you have another entity that's there working towards you going in the right direction.
Principal Mary Dean has worked in the Philadelphia School District for 26 years.
In a high-needs environment like this, our students need it. They really do. And I tell everyone, I have the smartest kids in the city. They are just brilliant. But you can't see that light, that brilliance, because of all of the difficulties that they bring with them when they come into our environment.
Before, under the zero tolerance policy, was any of that looked at? Was any of that taken?
No, they would be arrested.
Many U.S. school districts adopted some form of zero tolerance during the 80s and 90s as they tried to crack down on things like drugs and school shootings.
Back before the program started,
Naomi Goldstein is an expert in juvenile justice and a professor of psychology at Drexel University. She says kids will often outgrow bad behavior, and automatically arresting them can actually make things worse.
For kids who end up in the system, the chances that they continue their involvement over time increase. They're now exposed to the thinking and the behaviors of other kids who are heavily involved in the system or who have really done even things that are much more serious, which could then influence them in really negative ways, and so creating a negative cycle.
Goldstein says that cycle often starts at school. She says harsh penalties for breaking school rules push kids, minorities disproportionately, into the criminal justice system.
30 years ago, I went through academy, you lock them up and let someone else deal with those back-end issues.
Kevin Bethel spent 8 years as the deputy police commissioner overseeing security in the Philadelphia public schools. He used to be in charge of locking kids up.
That would involve taking that child from school, placing them in one of our 6 facilities around the city to process the juvenile. It'd be fingerprinted, photographed, held in a cell block upwards of 6 hours, waiting for a parent to arrive.
But then, about 6 years ago, Bethel began attending programs and workshops where he met advocates from other cities who were reforming their approach to juvenile justice. He learned more about adolescent development, trauma, and why kids act out.
It's hard for me to understand how we had allowed ourselves to be a part of that process and really had not taken a step back and been more thoughtful about what did it mean to take a child into a cell block, particularly when we come from a city with so much poverty and so much trauma, so much stress, and not understanding what was happening to that child.
And Bethel took a hard look at the reasons kids were getting arrested.
When I look at what we were locking them up for, things that I did as a kid. You know, I had my little Cub Scout knife. I got into fights in schools. I did all that stuff. And I'm locking up kids, and I'm a deputy commissioner. I did those things. That was a moment for me, and I turned to my bosses and said, man, I can't do it anymore.
Bethel started the diversion program in 2014, announcing that officers would arrest only when it was absolutely necessary.
I guess I was kind of leery
Officer Gulfin, who's worked the school beat for 10 years, is assigned to 6 schools, including West Philadelphia High. She says teachers there were skeptical too.
I think that teachers felt reassured when they saw us arresting kids. To them, suspension was not good enough. They just want to see something done. They want to see that child go out in handcuffs. And so when the program started, we weren't that clear on how things were going to go. But then as the program progressed, it got better and better. And I think it's great. I think it's really great now.
The program has had an impact. Throughout Philadelphia, student arrests have dropped by 71%, from nearly 1,600 in 2013-14 to 456 this school year. At West Philadelphia High School, arrests dropped from 21 to just 2 last year. Recidivism rates have improved citywide too. Before the program began, the rate for youth arrested was 27%. Today it's 14% for students who are diverted. And school safety improved. An average of 1,000 fewer serious incidents have been reported annually since the program began.
In my nearly 20-year career, looking at juvenile justice programs, it is almost unheard of to see results like this.
A main reason for the successful results, Goldstein says, the root causes of students' behavior are finally being addressed in the after-school programs they're sent to, like this one called The Bridge. The Diversion Initiative has taken advantage of already existing programs funded by the Philadelphia Department of Human Services, so there are no major new costs.
When the kids come in the door, they're not treated like criminals, they're still kids.
Tarina Smith is a case manager at The Bridge who counsels students and even visits the kids and their parents at home.
And a lot of times when kids come in the door, they come in for one thing, but it's so much deeper than that. It could be problems at home. It could be a cry for help. And once they start breaking things down to me, it's like, wow, this is a little adult here that had grown-up problems still as a kid.
Like you get in more trouble, right?
On Wednesday afternoons, there's a mentoring group just for the boys.
Art is a good way to express yourself.
And another one just for the girls. Nashay Smith is a 17-year-old high school senior. She was sent to The Bridge after getting caught with a taser at school.
My mom handed it to me. She gave it to me to protect myself. I used to go from school straight to work, and from work to home, wasn't getting off till like 11, 12.
At first, Nashay didn't show up for the program, and when she did, she wouldn't participate. She was failing her classes at school and says she had little ambition. But then she started to open up.
I didn't want to go to college. I didn't, because I just felt like I didn't want to do school no more. And then it was just like they talked to me. They was like, you can do it. And I was like, okay. And I can do it. I know I can. I got it in me.
Now she's on track to graduate and will attend Penn State University in the fall. If she sees it through, she'll be the first in her family to get a college degree.
Are there kids who you just can't reach sometimes?
Unfortunately, there are some kids that's just whatever you do, you're not going to reach them. But if we have 5 and only reach 3, that's a major accomplishment, because that's 3 more that's not going to be back out on the street.
As for Sanaj Jackson, Tarina checks in with him about his bad grades and skipping school.
You can't tell me, oh, I overslept. I woke up late, so I didn't go.
And she pushes him on his career goals. He told her he's interested in being a barber.
So you just want to be a regular barber?
I ain't gonna work there, I'm gonna own it.
Oh, okay, that's what I wanted to hear. So you're gonna own your own shop and you're gonna have people work for you?
Yes.
All right.
Get the hair laid down proper.
So Tarina set him up with a mentor at a nearby barber shop, and he started there a few days later.
Hey, while you're here, we'll show you how we do it, what we do, how to hold clippers.
It's a chance for Sanaj to gain real-world experience and a glimpse of a possible future.
I might even have some equipment for you when you leave out of here, okay?
Okay.
All right, hook me up real nice.
So I really wanted to share that video with you just to see the back end. That's the part that warms my heart. And so I ran long, and we have to split the rooms. But I do want to. I put this line up here because my boss, he always attributes, particularly in my policing space, but it always can kind of match out. The only thing we've dislike more than things staying the same is change. And then when I walk in the room, my cops say, hate it, they hate it, they hate it, they hate it. But if I changed it, oh my God, the world would come to an end. But part of this you can extrapolate to all of our spaces. We hate the way things are, but we don't want to change it, and we have to have the courage to bring about change. I think we have to make the commitment from our law enforcement folks across this nation to look at this space differently and work with our kids differently. We have a responsibility in our social services segment to really blend our resources together and work with agencies like the Human Rights and ACLU and youth groups across the nation to do that work. And that is so critical for us to be. And then the community, all of we are. We have a responsibility in the community to raise our voice around this issue. You know, I sit there and look this morning at the stock market, and I said if we paid as much attention to our kids as we do the stock market, I think we'd be able to do a lot of things differently. You know, if we said the decline in arrest was a success, we would probably be doing a lot of things differently. And so I just want to wrap there and say first to end by saying, you know, I'm in this space to help to change lives of young people, both here and so I want to again thank the commissioner and the deputy commissioner and all of those at the Human Rights and all of those in the room that allow me to come in your space. It is a really humbling honor, and I say that with heartfelt, that to be able to come in this space and talk about the work that I'm doing, but more importantly, to share to you that some of us out there do see things differently, and I do believe that policing departments across the nation are going to take hold of what we're doing and move forward in changing how we deal with our young people. So again, enjoy the rest of your conference, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today.